He held the gift high like he was handing over keys to a new car. But he opened his hand to reveal a cheap yellow pencil. The party laughed as if my son were nothing more than entertainment. That was when my phone buzzed with a name that turned my blood cold. It was the renewal file for Derek Voss waiting for my signature. Everyone thought he had just humiliated my boy, but he had actually just signed his own death warrant. My name is Lacey Figueroa, and if you looked closely enough at the edges of my smile, you could see the hairline fractures where my patience was holding on for dear life. The humidity in Charlotte was oppressive today, a thick and wet blanket that settled over the city around noon and refused to lift. It was 90 degrees in the shade, the kind of North Carolina heat that made your clothes cling to your skin the moment you stepped out of the air conditioning. We were gathered in a rented pavilion at Freedom Park, a sprawling green space that was currently filled with the screeching of cicadas and the forced laughter of my extended family. I stood near one of the metal support beams, nursing a glass of iced tea that had long since surrendered its ice to the temperature. The setup was picturesque in that specific, hollow way that social media loves. There were long folding tables covered in stark white linens that flapped lazily in the occasional hot breeze. Balloons in the school colors of navy blue and gold bobbed against the pavilion roof, their ribbons curling down like celebratory vines. A local catering company was managing a buffet line of pulled pork, coleslaw, and hush puppies, the smell of vinegar and roasting meat heavy in the air. It should have been a perfect afternoon. It was supposed to be a celebration, but the atmosphere felt less like a party and more like a performance. My son, Noah, stood near the gift table. He was 18 years old, a young man who had grown into his height only recently, shedding the awkwardness of adolescence for a quiet, observant stature. He was still wearing his graduation gown, unzipped over his dress shirt and tie. Despite the heat, my mother had insisted he keep it on for the pictures. She wanted the visual proof that a Figueroa had made it across the stage, as if she needed to document the event for a jury. I watched him as he navigated the social minefield. Noah was polite to a fault. He shook hands with uncles who had not bothered to call him on his birthday for 3 years. He accepted hugs from aunts who used to criticize his haircut or his quiet demeanor when he was a child. They were swarming him now, drawn by the free food and the obligation of family ties, offering generic congratulations that felt as substantial as the paper plates they were holding. "Good job, sport," I heard a distant cousin say, clapping Noah on the shoulder a little too hard. "So, what is the plan now? Staying local, I hear?" Noah smiled. It was a practiced expression, one he had perfected over years of navigating these exact waters. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice level. "Just taking it one step at a time." I gripped my glass tighter. The condensation slicked against my palm. It was the look in their eyes that made my stomach churn. I saw it over and over again as they approached him. It was not the look one gives to a conqueror or a scholar. It was not the beaming pride you see when the golden child of the family succeeds. It was a look of charitable surprise. They looked at my son as if he were merely lucky to be standing in the frame. They looked at him as if his high school diploma was a participation trophy, rather than something he had stayed up until 3 a.m. studying to achieve. To them, Noah was just Lacey's quiet kid, the one who did not play football, the one who liked reading more than talking. In my family, silence was often mistaken for a lack of intelligence, and kindness was frequently misdiagnosed as weakness. I wanted to walk over there, take the gown off his shoulders, and drive him to get a burger somewhere quiet, just the two of us. But we had obligations. We had to play the game. Then the energy in the pavilion shifted. It was a physical change, like the air pressure dropping before a thunderstorm. A black SUV pulled up onto the grass near the service entrance. Ignoring the signs that explicitly directed vehicles to the parking lot, the engine cut, and the door opened. Derek Voss had arrived. My brother-in-law stepped out of the vehicle with the confidence of a man who owned the very ground he walked on. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. The jacket slung casually over one shoulder despite the heat, his shirt crisp and white. He was handsome in a way that had curdled over the years. his charm hardening into a weaponized arrogance. He did not just enter a room, he annexed it. "There is the graduate," Derek's voice boomed across the lawn, loud enough to startle a few pigeons from the rafters. He threw his arms out wide, a politician greeting his constituents. The reaction was immediate. My mother, Lorraine, practically vibrated with excitement. She abandoned her conversation with Aunt Linda and rushed forward to greet him. The men in the family straightened their posture, drawn to Derek's orbit like moths to a bug zapper. He represented everything they admired: money, volume, and the ability to say whatever he wanted without consequence. Trailing about 3 feet behind him was my sister, Mallory. Seeing her always caused a dull ache in my chest. Mallory was beautiful, but she looked faded, like a photograph left in the sun for too long. She was wearing a designer dress that matched Derek's aesthetic, but her shoulders were hunched forward in a permanent flinch. She carried a gift bag in one hand and her purse in the other, her eyes scanning the crowd with an expression I knew intimately. It was the look of a bomb disposal technician walking into a room, scanning for tripwires. She caught my eye and offered a tight, apologetic smile. It was the smile of someone who knows they are bringing chaos into your house but feels powerless to stop it. She knew what Derek was like. She knew what he did to Noah. But she had made her choice years ago, and now she stood by it, silent and complicit. I watched Derek clap my father on the back, laughing at something he had said. The sound of Derek's laughter was grating, a sharp bark that demanded everyone else laugh along with him. My mind involuntarily rewound through the last 4 years. It was a highlight reel of subtle cruelty. I remembered Noah's 16th birthday dinner. Noah had been excited about making the robotics team. Derek had waited until the cake was served to ask, loud enough for the whole table to hear, if the robot could do Noah's homework for him since his grades were struggling. They were not struggling. Noah had a 3.8 GPA. But the table laughed, and Noah had gone quiet. I remembered the time Noah won an essay contest in his junior year. Derek had patted him on the head like a dog and said, "It is cute that they give awards for feelings now, in the real world. Noah, nobody cares about your diary." Every milestone my son reached, Derek was there to paint over it with a shade of mediocrity. He had a talent for it. He could take a gold medal and make it look like tin. He could take a scholarship and make it sound like a clerical error. And the worst part was that the family let him do it. They feared his success, or they wanted his approval. So they laughed. They validated him. They taught my son that his achievements were only punchlines for his uncle's stand-up routine. "Lacey," Derek called out, spotting me by the pole. He walked over, bringing the scent of expensive cologne and aggression with him. "You look tired, sweetheart. Keeping busy?" "Hello, Derek," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I am fine, just enjoying Noah's day." Right. Big day," he said, turning to look at Noah, who had stiffened the moment he heard Derek's voice. Derek's grin widened. It was a predatory expression. "We have to make sure we send him off properly. Can't let the kid go into the world thinking it is all sunshine and rainbows, right?" "He knows how the world works." "Derek," I said, stepping slightly between them, blocking his line of sight. "Does he?" Derek chuckled, stepping around me as if I were a piece of furniture. "We will see." He moved toward the buffet, and the crowd parted for him. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on my neck that had nothing to do with the weather. Mallory came up beside me. She smelled like white wine and anxiety. "I tried to get him to leave the gift at home," she whispered, not looking at me. She was watching her husband piling brisket onto a plate. "He insisted on bringing it. He said he had a special speech prepared." "A speech?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Mallory, this is Noah's graduation party. Tell me he's not going to make a scene." Mallory looked at me then, and her eyes were wet. "I can't stop him. Lacey, you know I can't stop him." "You mean you won't," I said. She flinched, but she did not deny it. She just looked down at her manicured nails and sighed. Just try not to let Noah take it personally. You know how Derek is. He thinks he is being funny. He thinks he is helping. Helping? I scoffed. Is that what we are calling it now? Before she could answer, a high-pitched squeal tore through the air. Feedback. Every head in the pavilion turned. Over by the DJ booth, where a small sound system had been set up for background music and announcements, Derek was standing with a microphone in his hand. He tapped it twice. Thump, thump. The sound echoed heavily in the humid air. Testing, testing, Derek said, his voice amplified and booming, instantly commanding the attention of all 50 guests. Can everyone hear me? Is this thing on? My stomach dropped through the floor. I looked at Noah. He was standing alone by the gift table now, his hands clasped in front of him. He saw Derek with the microphone, and I saw the mask slide into place. It was a defense mechanism he had perfected over a lifetime of being in this family. He locked his jaw. He neutralized his expression. He became a statue. He had told me once, after a particularly brutal Thanksgiving where Derek had mocked his choice of colleges, "Mom, if I don't react, it is not fun for him. If I get mad, they laugh harder. If I cry, they win. I just have to wait it out." It broke my heart then, and it shattered it now. My son, on the day he should have been celebrating his freedom, was bracing for impact. He was preparing to endure his family rather than enjoy them. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," Derek shouted, grinning as he held center stage. He loved this. He loved the eyes on him. He loved the silence that fell over the crowd. The anticipation. We have a lot to celebrate today. Or, well, we have something to celebrate. Anyway, a few people chuckled, the preemptive laugh. They were already priming themselves to find him funny. I took a step forward, my instinct to intervene flaring up. I wanted to march over there and unplug the speaker. I wanted to snatch the microphone from his hand and tell him to get out. But I froze. If I caused a scene, I would be the crazy one. I would be the dramatic single mother who could not take a joke. I would ruin the party in a different way. And Noah would still be humiliated. Just with more yelling. I had to wait. I had to let him play his hand. Today is Noah's day, I whispered to myself, the mantra feeling useless against the reality unfolding before me. But as I watched Derek preening under the pavilion lights, bathing in the attention, a dark thought settled in the back of my mind. I knew my family. I knew they never let anyone be fully happy. There was always a tax to be paid for joy, and Derek was the tax collector. However, as I stood there, feeling the heat radiate off the concrete, I also felt the weight of my phone in my pocket. It was heavy, like a stone. I did not know it yet, but the balance of power was shifting. Derek thought he was holding court. He thought he was the protagonist of this story. He had no idea that while he was preparing to tear my son down, the universe was quietly, methodically, arranging the pieces for his own destruction. "All right, settle down, Derek said, waving a hand dismissively at the quiet crowd. "I just wanted to say a few words about our nephew here, about the big step he is taking into the, well, let us call it the real world." He paused for effect, his eyes locking onto Noah. Noah didn't blink. He just stared back, waiting for the blow. I took a deep breath, the thick air filling my lungs. "Hold on. Noah," I thought, "just hold on." The microphone crackled again, a sharp burst of static that seemed to mirror the snapping of my own nerves. Derek Voss did not flinch. He stood center stage under the pavilion roof, the late afternoon sun cutting across his face, highlighting the sheen of perspiration on his forehead that he wore like a layer of Teflon. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who had told this joke 1,000 times and knew exactly where the punchline would land. "You know," Derek said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial register that the amplification system carried to every corner of the park, "I was thinking back to Noah's freshman year. We all remember that phase, right?" He paused, letting the audience lean in. They were like iron filings drawn to his magnet. "I took the boy fishing," Derek continued. grinning as he gestured toward my son with his free hand. Just me and him. I thought, hey, every young man needs to know how to hook a worm. We get out on the lake. Beautiful morning. I hand him the bait. And Noah, he looks at this worm, and he looks at me, and he asks if the worm has a central nervous system. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. It was low at first, polite, but it gained momentum as people realized it was safe to join in. He was worried about the worm's feelings, Derek roared, slapping his own thigh. I told him, Noah, the fish do not care about the worm's feelings, and neither does the frying pan. We ended up eating sandwiches that day because he refused to cast the line. He sat there reading a book about aquatic ecosystems while I did the actual fishing. The laughter was louder now. I looked around the tables. My cousin Mike was chuckling into his beer. My uncle Steve was shaking his head with a smirk that said, typical. They were not laughing because the story was particularly funny. They were laughing because it was easier than silence. Silence would have implied judgment. Silence would have meant they saw the cruelty beneath the anecdote. By laughing, they absolved themselves. They became part of the joke, rather than bystanders to a bullying session. It was a social survival instinct, and Derek played it like a maestro. But hey, Derek said, pivoting seamlessly, that is our Noah, always thinking, always observing. Not really a hands-on kind of guy. Are we, sport? He winked at Noah. It was a gesture that masqueraded as affection, but felt like a slap. From the table to my left, a voice drifted up through the humid air. It was Great Aunt Myra, a woman whose kindness was always laced with a subtle poison. She adjusted her glasses and nodded sagely to the woman sitting next to her. Well, it is for the best, Myra said, loud enough for me to hear, and likely loud enough for Noah, too. He is a homebody. Going to school close to the house is good for him. It stops him from getting too many wild ideas. Better to stay where it is safe than to go out there and get eaten alive. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Noah was too soft for the real world. He belonged in the local lane, the slow lane. He was not built for greatness. He was built for convenience. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck, hot enough to rival the North Carolina sun. I turned my head to look at my mother, Lorraine. She was sitting at the head table, her hands clasped around a paper napkin. She heard Myra. She heard Derek. She saw Noah standing there, his smile fixed and brittle, and she laughed. It was a small, tittering sound, a nervous release of air. She looked at Derek with shining eyes, nodding along as if to say, yes, isn't he a character? That sound broke something inside me. It was not the laughter of malice. My mother did not hate Noah. She loved him, in her own deluded way, but she feared Derek more. She feared the awkwardness of confrontation. She feared disrupting the perfect family afternoon she had bragged about to her church group. Her laughter was the sound of cowardice. It was the sound of a woman who would rather throw her grandson's dignity into the fire than risk a moment of social friction. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to scream. Do you not see what he is doing? Do you not see him carving pieces off your grandson just to feed his own ego? But I stood still. I watched Derek inhale the adulation. He was energized by it. The more they laughed, the broader his shoulders seemed to get. He was feeding off the crowd, using their compliance as a shield. As long as they were laughing, he wasn't a bully. He was just the fun uncle. He was the charismatic provider who paid for the catering. So he bought the right to tear us down. And now, Derek said, leaning against the DJ booth, looking relaxed and regal, we are sending him off to college. Big step, huge step. He looked directly at Noah, the predator locking eyes with the prey. I know we have kept it a bit quiet, Derek said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy, but let us be real for a second. The kid is probably heading to the community college down on 4th Street, right? And you know what? That is smart. It is practical. He emphasized the word practical the way one might describe orthopedic shoes or a minivan. It was a word that stripped away all magic, all ambition, all dream. Why go into debt? Derek continued, opening his hands wide. Why chase some fancy degree when you can learn a trade? Noah is a realistic kid. He knows his limits. He knows where he fits. Community college it is safe. It is just enough. Just enough. I saw Noah's hand, hanging by his side, clench into a fist. The knuckles turned white against the navy blue fabric of his gown. It was the only sign of life in his frozen posture. He kept his chin up. He kept his eyes on Derek. He did not speak. He did not correct him. He had learned the hard way that correcting Derek only extended the lecture. If you argued, you were sensitive. If you proved him wrong, you were disrespectful. Mallory, my sister, was standing near the buffet line, holding a plate she had not touched. She was looking at Noah, and for a second, her mask slipped. I saw the shame there. Deep, abiding shame. Not shame for Noah, but shame for herself. She knew this was a lie. She knew Derek was making assumptions based on his own need to feel superior, but she said nothing. She took a sip of her wine and looked at the ground, studying the grass as if the secrets of the universe were hidden in the dirt. She had allowed this dynamic to fester for 20 years, and now she was drowning in it. My mind flashed back to a dinner 3 months ago. We had been at a steakhouse for my father's birthday. Noah had mentioned a book he was reading about architectural engineering. He had been animated, passionate. Derek had cut him off mid-sentence. Engineering? Please, stick to things you can actually handle. Noah, you are good at the artsy stuff, the useless stuff. Leave the math to the men who run businesses. He had called Noah's honor roll certificate a participation award for showing up. He had called a small merit scholarship Noah received in junior year dumb luck and affirmative action for quiet kids. Every single time Noah tried to stand up, Derek knocked him down. And every single time, the family just ate their steak and changed the subject. The crowd at the pavilion was murmuring now, nodding in agreement with Derek's assessment. Yes, community college. Very sensible. Good for Noah. They were writing his obituary before his life had even started. They were deciding his value based on the appraisal of a man who leveraged debt to buy respect. Derek was glowing. He had the room in the palm of his hand. He had successfully lowered the bar for Noah so low that it was buried underground, ensuring that no matter what Noah did, he would never rise above the sensible little box Derek had built for him. I felt a vibration against my hip. My phone. It was a short, sharp buzz, a notification. I ignored it. My eyes were glued to Derek. I needed to see this through. I needed to witness the full extent of his arrogance. I needed to let him dig the hole so deep that he would never be able to climb out of it. The vibration came again, insistent, like a heartbeat against my leg. Look at me. It seemed to say, look at me. But I could not look away from the train wreck. Derek tapped the microphone again. The sound was a dull thud. Thud. Anyway, he shouted, signaling a shift in the program. Enough of the serious talk. We are here to celebrate, right? And what is a celebration without a little generosity? The master of ceremonies, a hired DJ who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, took his cue. He cranked up the background music, some generic, uplifting instrumental track, and grabbed his own microphone. All right, everyone, the DJ announced with forced enthusiasm. Let us give it up for the man of the hour. Uncle Derek, I believe he has a special presentation for the graduate, a special gift for a special young man. The crowd clapped. It was a conditioned response. Derek loved applause, and they were trained seals. That is right, Derek said, stepping away from the booth and walking toward the center of the open space. Motioning for Noah to join him. Come here, Noah, front and center. Noah hesitated for a fraction of a second. I saw his eyes dart to me. It was a plea. Do I have to? I gave him a nearly imperceptible nod. Yes, go. Let him do it. Noah walked forward. He moved with a dignity that seemed out of place in this circus. He stood next to Derek, who draped a heavy arm around his shoulders, leaning his weight on my son as if Noah were a crutch. I wanted to get him something that really represents his future, Derek said to the crowd, his voice booming without the mic now, projecting with the confidence of a stage actor. Something that says, "I know who you are, and I know where you are going." He reached into his jacket pocket. The crowd leaned in. They were expecting a car key, maybe a check, maybe a watch. They were expecting the grand gesture that Derek was famous for, the kind that came with strings attached. I slipped my hand into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around my phone. The metal was cool to the touch. The buzzing had stopped, but the screen was waiting. I watched Derek's hand pause inside his jacket. Building the suspense, he was enjoying the torture. He was savoring the moment before the reveal. "Are you ready, Noah?" Derek asked, looking down at my son with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Noah stared straight ahead. "I am ready, Uncle Derek." "Good man," Derek said. He began to withdraw his hand. The air in the pavilion seemed to thicken, the humidity pressing down on us all. I took a shallow breath. The trap was set, the players were in position, and Derek Voss was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The silence that stretched across the pavilion was heavy and manufactured. Derek Voss knew exactly how to manipulate a pause. He stood there in the center of the concrete slab, the sun beating down on the back of his neck, casting a long shadow that seemed to swallow my son whole. Derek took a step forward, closing the distance between himself and Noah, invading my son's personal space with the entitlement of a landlord inspecting a tenant's apartment. "Congratulations, Mr. Graduate," Derek boomed. He did not need the microphone anymore. His voice was projected from the diaphragm, trained in boardrooms where he shouted down contractors and intimidated junior loan officers. "I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I really did. I wanted to give you something that matches your future perfectly." He held his right hand up, clenched into a tight fist. He held it at chest level, shaking it slightly, teasing the contents. It was the universal gesture for a car key or perhaps a jewelry box. I saw the ripple effect move through the crowd. My cousin, Brenda, pulled her phone out of her purse and held it up, hitting the record button. Beside her, Uncle Steve did the same. They were not recording a memory. They were capturing content. They sensed the drama in the air, the thick, electric tension of a train wreck in progress. And they wanted to be the first to post it on Facebook. They wanted the engagement that came from a family spectacle. "Open it!" someone shouted from the back tables. It sounded like my father, his voice slurred slightly by the heat and the beer. Derek smiled. It was a slow, stretching movement of his lips that showed too many teeth. He looked at Noah, eyes dancing with a cruel, private amusement. "You ready for the keys to the kingdom, kid?" Derek asked softly, just loud enough for the front row to hear. Noah did not step back. He stood his ground, though I could see the muscles in his neck straining. He nodded once. "Yes, Uncle Derek." Derek held the suspense for another 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. It was agonizing. It was theatrical. Then, with a flourish usually reserved for magicians revealing a dove, Derek opened his hand. He splayed his fingers wide, palm up, presenting the object to the sunlight. It was not a key. It was not a check. It was not a watch. It was a pencil. A single, yellow, standard number 2 pencil. It was not even a nice mechanical one. It was the cheapest kind you could buy in bulk at the dollar store. The yellow paint was chipped near the ferrule. The eraser was that hard, dusty pink that smudged paper rather than cleaning it. And, most insultingly, it was unsharpened. The wood at the tip was flat and blunt. It was useless. It could not write. It could not create. It was a stick of wood with potential that had been denied. I could see a small white rectangle stuck to the side of the hexagonal barrel. It was a price tag that had been half peeled off, leaving a sticky gray residue. The object sat in Derek's manicured palm like an insult made physical. "Here," Derek said, his voice dropping the theatrical boom for a flat, brutal, matter-of-fact tone. "This is all you deserve." The sentence hung in the humid air for a split second. processing in the minds of the guests. Community college does not need anything more than this, Derek added, tossing the pencil toward Noah. He did not hand it to him, he tossed it. It was a short, underhand flick. The pencil tumbled through the air, turning end over end, and hit Noah in the chest. It bounced off his graduation gown with a pathetic, hollow tap before clattering onto the concrete floor between them. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, the laughter started. It began at the table where Derek's friends and business associates were sitting, the people he had invited to his nephew's party as a buffer for his own ego. A man in a polo shirt clapped his hands together, barking out a laugh. "Good one, Derek!" "Keep him humble," the man shouted. That broke the dam. My Uncle Steve let out a sharp, piercing whistle, the kind used to call a dog. He was shaking his head, grinning, slapping the table. "A pencil," Aunt Myra cackled, covering her mouth with a napkin, though her eyes were crinkled with malicious delight. "Oh, Lord, that is rich, that is honest." The laughter spread like a contagion. It rolled over the tables, gathering strength. People I had known my entire life, people who had held Noah when he was a baby, were now chuckling at his public degradation. They were not laughing because it was clever. A pencil is not a clever joke. They were laughing because Derek Voss was the most powerful man in the room, and he had given them permission to punch down. They were laughing to align themselves with the alpha, to ensure that they remained in his good graces. I saw a teenage cousin in the back row zooming in with her phone camera, making sure she got a clear shot of the pencil lying on the dirty concrete. She was smiling. This was going to be a great story for her Instagram story. Family drama roast. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a tightening so severe I thought my heart might actually stop beating. It was a mixture of grief and fury that tasted like copper in my mouth. I looked at Mallory. My sister was staring at the pencil on the ground. She was not laughing, but she was not moving either. She was frozen in that familiar pose of learned helplessness, letting her husband trample her nephew because intervening would mean facing Derek later. Noah looked down at the pencil. He did not rush to pick it up. He looked at it as if it were a foreign object, something radioactive. Slowly, with a control that defied his 18 years, Noah bent at the waist. He did not crouch. He bowed. He reached down and picked up the yellow piece of wood. He stood back up, brushing a speck of dust off the unsharpened tip. He looked at Derek. His face was pale. The blood drained away by shock, but his expression remained fixed in that polite, terrible mask. "Thank you," Noah said. His voice was quiet. It was a whisper lost in the gale of laughter. He knew the rules. If he threw the pencil back, he was the ungrateful brat. If he yelled, he was unstable. If he cried, he was weak. The only move left to him on this rigged chessboard was to accept the insult with grace. But Derek was not done. The compliance did not satisfy him. He wanted a reaction. He wanted to see the hurt. He wanted to see the boy crumble so he could feel like a giant. Derek cupped a hand to his ear, leaning forward with an exaggerated grimace. "What was that?" Derek shouted over the dying laughter. "I could not hear you. You have to project, son. The world does not listen to whispers." Noah tightened his grip on the pencil. I saw his knuckles pop. "I said thank you," Noah repeated, slightly louder, but his voice cracked on the second word. Derek sneered. It was a look of pure disgust. "Speak up. Community college, boy. If you are going to be a failure, at least be a loud one." Something inside me snapped. It was not a snap like a twig breaking. It was a snap like a heavy steel cable parting under tension. The sound was deafening in my own head, drowning out the cicadas and the laughter and the humidity. The heat that had been flushing my skin suddenly vanished. In its place, a cold, crystalline clarity washed over me. It started at the base of my spine and shot up to my brain, cooling the rage into something solid and sharp. I looked at Derek Voss. I really looked at him. I saw the sweat staining the collar of his expensive shirt. I saw the desperate need for validation in his eyes. I saw a man who felt so small that he had to stand on the neck of an 18-year-old boy just to feel tall. You chose this, I thought. The voice in my head sounded strange. It did not sound like Lacey the mother or Lacey the sister. It sounded like Lacey the senior risk analyst. It sounded like the woman who spent 40 hours a week deciding which businesses deserved to survive and which ones were built on lies. You chose the battlefield. Derek, you brought weapons to a birthday party. You thought you were fighting an unarmed opponent. My blood was no longer boiling. It was freezing. It was the absolute zero of a judge passing a sentence. I watched him gloat. I watched him turn to the crowd, soaking in their admiration for his cruelty. He thought he had won. He thought the pencil was the punchline. Then, my pocket vibrated. It was not the soft buzz of a notification this time. It was a long, sustained, angry vibration. It felt demanding. It felt urgent. It was the signal I had been dreading, and yet, in this precise moment, it felt like a weapon being placed into my hand. I did not need to look at the screen to know what it was. But I pulled the phone out anyway. The screen lit up, bright against the shade of the pavilion. The time was displayed clearly. The deadline was here. Derek was still laughing at his own joke, pointing at the unsharpened pencil in my son's hand. Okay, I thought, my thumb hovering over the unlocked screen. If this is how you want to play, if this is the game. I looked at Noah one last time. He looked so lonely standing there, clutching that cheap piece of wood as if it were a lifeline. Hold on, baby. I promised him silently. Just one more minute. I unlocked the phone. The interface of my work email stared back at me. The subject lines were red. The priority flags were high. The universe has a funny way of balancing the scales. Derek had handed my son a symbol of worthlessness. I was holding the button that could delete Derek's entire existence. I took a breath. The air tasted different now. It did not taste like humidity and pork barbecue anymore. It tasted like ink. It tasted like paperwork. It tasted like foreclosure. I stepped away from the pillar. I began to walk toward the center of the pavilion. Derek did not see me coming. He was too busy looking at his audience, but Noah saw me. And for the first time that day, the fear in his eyes flickered, replaced by confusion. He saw something in my face that he had never seen before. He saw his mother going to war. I swiped the notification open, and the world of sticky humidity and cheap barbecue sauce vanished. In its place was the clean, cold, blue-lit reality of my professional life. The message was from Jenna Klein, my executive assistant at Sable Point Commercial Lending. Jenna did not text me on Saturdays unless the building was on fire or a client was about to jump off a ledge. The text was short, precise, and terrifyingly clear. The credit committee meeting has been pushed up, it read. They are convening in 35 minutes. The Voss Stone commercial file is on the docket. They need your final recommendation on the covenant waiver. It expires today. Lacey. Close of business. I stared at the screen, my brain shifting gears so violently I almost felt the grind. Voss Stone. For years, I had kept my work and my family in two different airtight compartments. I knew Derek was a developer. I knew he had loans. I knew Sable Point held paper on half the construction projects in Charlotte, but I had never personally touched the Voss Stone file. It had been managed by a junior underwriter in a different division. Someone who likely bought into Derek's flashy presentations and projected charisma. But when a file reaches the danger zone, when a borrower is bleeding out and asking for a tourniquet, it gets kicked up the ladder. It gets kicked to me. I scrolled up. There was a PDF attachment titled Voss Stone _Q2 _compliance _report _draft. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The text from Jenna told me everything I needed to know. A covenant waiver is banker speak for a second chance. It means the borrower has broken a promise. Maybe they failed to maintain enough cash on hand. Maybe their debt-to-income ratio ballooned. Maybe the project is 3 months behind schedule and $2 million over budget. Whatever the sin, the bank has the legal right to call the loan, to demand every single penny back, immediately. A waiver is the bank saying, "Okay, we will not kill you today. We will give you a few more months to fix this." And Derek's waiver was expiring today. Jenna sent a second text, 3 gray bubbles appearing in rapid succession. If we do not grant the extension, the automated system triggers the acceleration clause at 5 o'clock. The general contractor is already threatening to walk off the Crown Line quarter site if the funding draw is not approved by Monday morning. The equity partners are calling every 10 minutes. It is a mess. Lacey, what do you want to do? I looked up from the phone. 50 feet away. Derek was still standing over my son. He was grinning, basking in the afterglow of his pencil joke. He looked powerful. He looked rich. He looked like the king of Charlotte, holding court in a rented park pavilion. But for the first time in my life, I did not see Derek the bully. I did not see Derek the successful brother-in-law who drove a Mercedes and vacations in the Caymans. I saw a distressed asset. I saw a talking bad loan. It was a transformative moment of clarity. I looked at his smile, and I saw a facade masking a liquidity crisis. I looked at his expensive suit, and I saw an expense he could not actually afford. I looked at the way he puffed out his chest, and I realized it was the same way failing companies puff up their revenue projections right before they file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. He was not a monster. He was just a liability. And my job, the thing I was better at than anyone else in the state, was mitigating liability. Derek was bragging about the Crown Line quarter project just an hour ago. He had told my father it was going to reshape the skyline. He had told my cousins that the pre-sales were through the roof. Lies. All of it. If he needed a waiver this badly. If the contractors were packing up their tools. Then Crown Line quarter was not an empire. It was a house of cards held together by debt and my signature. He was standing there, destroying my son's confidence, completely unaware that the guillotine was hanging directly over his own neck. And the rope holding the blade? It was in my hand. I felt a strange calmness settle over me. It was the icy detachment of the boardroom, the anger I had felt moments ago, the hot, red flush of a mother protecting her child, crystallized into something much more dangerous. It became leverage. I typed a quick reply to Jenna. Hold the committee. Do not release the acceleration notice yet. I am handling the principal borrower now. I slipped the phone back into my hand. Keeping the screen unlocked, I pushed off the metal pillar I had been leaning against. My heels sank slightly into the soft grass. But I didn't stumble. I walked toward the center of the pavilion. I did not rush. I moved with the steady, inexorable pace of a foreclosure notice arriving in the mail. The atmosphere in the pavilion began to shift as I moved. At first, people didn't notice. They were still chuckling, grabbing more beer, dissecting the pencil joke, but as I cut through the crowd, the laughter began to die down. It wasn't because I was making a scene, it was because of the way I was walking. I wasn't walking like Lacey, the quiet sister. I was walking like the senior vice president of risk management. There is a specific energy you carry when you hold the power of economic life and death over someone. It changes your posture. It changes the set of your jaw. People sense it instinctively, like animals sensing a drop in barometric pressure. My cousin Mike stopped laughing and lowered his beer bottle, watching me pass. Aunt Myra's smile faltered. I kept my eyes locked on Derek. He was still talking to Noah, probably adding a postscript to his humiliation. You will thank me later, kid. The world is tough. You have to be tougher. Mallory was the first to realize something was wrong. She was standing a few feet behind Derek, holding her wine glass like a shield. She looked up and saw me coming. Her eyes widened. She saw the phone in my hand, held out like a weapon. She saw the flat, dead look in my eyes. Mallory knew me. She knew that I never confronted anyone. She knew I kept the peace at all costs. So, seeing me march directly into the line of fire with this level of focus terrified her. Her face drained of color, turning a pasty, ash gray. She looked like a passenger in a car who sees the cliff edge before the driver does. But her vocal cords were paralyzed. She opened her mouth to warn him, to say, "Derek, stop," but nothing came out. I stepped onto the concrete slab of the pavilion floor. The sound of my heels clicked sharply. Clack, clack, clack. The sound cut through the remaining murmurs. Derek turned. He sensed the change in the room's temperature. He saw me approaching, and his grin faltered for a fraction of a second before he reassembled it. He thought I was coming to defend Noah. He thought I was coming to play the role of the hysterical, overprotective mother. He was ready for that. He had jokes prepared for that. "Oh, look," Derek said, spreading his arms wide, inviting the crowd to watch the next act of the show. "Here comes Mama Bear, coming to rescue the cub from a little bit of reality." He laughed, expecting the crowd to join him. A few people nervously chuckled, but it died out quickly. They were looking at me. They saw that I wasn't crying. I wasn't shouting. I stopped 3 feet away from him. I didn't look at Noah. I didn't look at the pencil on the ground. I looked directly into Derek's pupils. "You have a lot to say about reality today." "Derek," I said. My voice was not loud, but it was projected perfectly. It was my boardroom voice, crisp, authoritative, and devoid of warmth. Derek blinked. He hadn't expected that tone. He shifted his weight, trying to regain the high ground. "I am just trying to help the boy. Lacey, someone has to teach him about the future. He can't hide in his room forever." "The future." I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. I glanced down at my phone, then back up at him. The silence in the pavilion was absolute now. Even the DJ had turned down the background music. The wind seemed to hold its breath. "It is funny you should use that word," I said, taking one small step closer, invading his space the way he had invaded my son's. "You just spent 10 minutes talking about Noah's future, about what he deserves, about where he is going." I raised the phone slightly, the screen glowing with Jenna's urgent messages about default, acceleration clauses, and angry partners. "It is a really funny coincidence," I continued, my voice dropping to a register that was intimate and lethal, loud enough for the family to hear, but directed solely at his soul. "Because, Derek, your future is currently sitting right here, inside my phone." Derek frowned, a flicker of genuine confusion crossing his face. "What are you talking about? Don't be dramatic." "Lacey?" "I am not being dramatic," I said, tilting my head slightly. "I am being practical. Isn't that what you like? Practicality?" I saw Mallory put a hand over her mouth. She knew. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew the smell of disaster. Derek's eyes darted to the phone, then back to my face. The arrogance was still there, but the foundation was shaking. He didn't know what I had, but he knew I had something. "You might want to check your email, Derek," I said softly. "But before you do, you should probably listen to me very carefully." Derek tried to pivot, and it was almost painful to watch. The arrogance that had coated him like a second skin just moments ago began to crack, revealing the slimy, desperate layer beneath. He forced a laugh, a hollow, barking sound that bounced awkwardly off the metal roof of the pavilion. He looked around at the crowd, silently commanding them to join him, to validate his reality. But the audience was faltering. They sensed the shift in barometric pressure. They realized that the script had changed. "Oh, come on," Derek said, waving a hand dismissively in my face. "Don't be so serious. Lacey, it is a roast. We are family. You need to learn how to take a joke. Everyone is having a good time, right?" He looked toward his friends at the back table, begging for backup. One of them offered a weak thumbs up. But he did not smile. I did not blink. I kept my face perfectly still, a mask of professional detachment. "A joke is when everyone laughs because there is joy in the room," I said, my voice cutting through the humid air like a scalpel. "A joke implies a shared understanding, but this is not a joke. Derek, this is a room full of people laughing because they are relieved they are not the target. That is not humor. That is bullying disguised as comedy, and frankly, it is beneath you, or at least, it should be." Derek's smile stiffened until it resembled a rictus of pain. He stepped closer to me, invading my personal space again. But this time, it was not to intimidate. It was to contain. He reached out, his fingers aiming for my elbow, intending to guide me away from the center stage, away from the eyes and ears of the people he needed to impress. "Let us step aside," he muttered, his voice dropping to a low, urgent hiss that only I could hear. "We can talk about whatever is bothering you over by the car. Don't make a scene in front of your mother." I saw the tactic for what it was. It was classic damage control. He wanted to isolate the variable. He wanted to take me to a private corner where he could use his height and his loud voice to bully me into submission without witnesses. He knew, instinctively, that his power relied on the audience. If he could get me alone, he could gaslight me. He could tell me I was crazy, that I was hormonal, that I was ruining Noah's day, but I was not going anywhere. I planted my feet firmly on the concrete. I locked my knees. "No," I said, raising my voice slightly so that it carried to the buffet line. "We are not going to talk by the car. We are going to talk right here. You were perfectly comfortable discussing my son's prospects in front of 50 people. Surely you are comfortable discussing your own." Derek recoiled as if I had slapped him. "Lacey, I am warning you." "Warning me?" I interrupted, tilting my head. "Is that a threat, Derek? Because before you finish that sentence, you might want to see what is on the agenda for this afternoon." I lifted my phone. I did not just hold it. I presented it. I turned the screen directly toward his face, holding it steady so he could read every pixel. The brightness was turned up to the maximum. The text from Jenna was gone, replaced by the file header I had opened. Vostone Commercial. Covenant Waiver Extension Request. Pending immediate review. The color did not just drain from Derek's face, it vanished. He went from a healthy, sun-flushed pink to the gray of old ash in less than a second. His eyes widened, fixing on the words Vostone and waiver as if they were the name of a terminal disease. He knew exactly what that file was. He knew exactly what it meant that I had it on my phone on a Saturday afternoon. He knew that the covenant waiver was the only thing standing between him and financial ruin. It was the legal document that allowed him to keep breathing despite breaking the bank's rules on liquidity, and he knew, with a sudden, horrifying clarity, that the person holding the pen for that waiver was not some faceless bureaucrat in a downtown tower. It was the woman standing in front of him, the woman whose son he had just handed a pencil. He looked up at me, and for the first time in the 20 years I had known him, I saw genuine fear. It was raw and naked. "You," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You are the senior risk officer on the account?" "I am the person who decides if you keep your job site open on Monday morning," I corrected him calmly. "Or if we padlock the gates and liquidate the assets." Derek swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed convulsively. He looked around frantically, checking to see if anyone had heard. "Don't," he hissed, pointing a finger at me, though the finger was trembling. "Don't you dare drag my business into this. This is a family party. You do not mix the two. It is unprofessional." I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. I pointed to the pencil that was still clutching in Noah's hand. "Unprofessional?" I asked. "You just handed my son a piece of wood and told him it was all he deserved. You just publicly devalued my child in front of his grandmother, his cousins, and your business partners. You brought his future into this party first. Derek, I am just balancing the ledger." "What is going on?" The voice came from the head table. My mother, Lorraine, had finally stood up. She looked confused, her napkin crumpled in her hand. She sensed the tension, but she didn't understand the mechanics of it. She just saw her daughter confronting her favorite son-in-law, and her instinct was to smooth it over. "Lacey, why are you shouting at Derek?" she asked, her voice whining slightly. "He was just having a little fun. Don't ruin the mood." I turned to look at my mother. "I am not ruining the mood. Mom," I said. "We are just talking about investments. Derek here is very concerned with return on investment. He was just explaining to everyone why Noah is a bad investment, why he is not worth anything more than a 10-cent pencil." I turned back to Derek. Isn't that right? You think Noah is a low-yield asset? You think he is risky? You think he doesn't have the capital to succeed? Derek opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was trapped between two worlds. He could not defend himself without admitting his own financial precarity, and he could not attack me without guaranteeing that I would deny his loan waiver. Then, movement caught my eye. Noah stepped forward. My son, who had spent his entire life making himself smaller to avoid Derek's radar, took a step toward us. He was still holding the pencil, but he wasn't looking at it anymore. He was looking at his uncle. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking, but his chin was up. It wasn't a joke, Noah said. His voice was quiet, but in the electrified silence of the pavilion, it sounded like a shout. Derek turned to him, grateful for a softer target. Noah, stay out of this. Your mother is being— No, Noah interrupted. He had never interrupted an adult in his life. You are not joking. You have done this for 4 years. Every holiday, every birthday, you make me feel like I am stupid. You make me feel like I am broken because I don't want to be like you. Noah took a breath, his chest heaving under the graduation gown. You smile when you say it, but you are not trying to be funny. You are trying to hurt me. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a truth being spoken in a room built on lies. The family stared. My aunts, my uncles, the cousins, they all looked at Noah, then at Derek. The illusion was shattering. The fun uncle mask was slipping, revealing the bully beneath. They couldn't laugh this off. A child had just called out a grown man for cruelty, and the accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Mallory let out a small, strangled sound. "Derek," she whispered. "Enough. Please, just stop." Her voice was weak, barely a whisper. But it was there. It was a crack in her compliance. She looked at her husband with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. She saw the way the crowd was looking at him, not with admiration anymore, but with a dawning, uncomfortable realization. They were shifting in their seats. They were looking at their plates. The spell was broken. Derek sensed he was losing the room. He needed to regain control. He needed to minimize the damage. He forced a smile back onto his face, but it looked gruesome, like a split in a piece of fruit. Okay, Derek said, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender. Everyone is very sensitive today. It is the heat, right? It makes us all a little edgy. He gestured to the pencil in Noah's hand. Look, it is just a pencil. All right, Derek said, trying to inject some of his old swagger back into his voice. It is a writing utensil. It is not a declaration of war. I was just saying he should write his own destiny. It is a metaphor. You people are reading way too much into this. I stepped into his line of sight. Blocking his view of the crowd, I wanted him to look at me, only me. No, I said. It is not just a pencil. I looked at the cheap, yellow wood, the unsharpened tip, the dusty eraser. If you had given him a pen, it would have meant you thought he had authority, I said, breaking it down with the cold logic of an underwriter. If you had given him a planner, it would have meant you thought he had a future to schedule. If you had given him a blank book, it would meant you thought he had ideas. I looked up into Derek's eyes. You gave him an unsharpened pencil, I said. You gave him something that requires outside force to be useful. You gave him something that is designed to be erased. You gave him a tool for temporary, unimportant things. I took a breath. It is a message, Derek. You were telling him that he is unfinished, that he is dull, that his mistakes are the only thing that matters because they can be wiped away. I held up my phone again. The screen was still glowing. So now, I said softly, I am going to send you a message, and unlike yours, mine cannot be erased. Derek stared at the phone. He looked like a man watching a bomb countdown. Lacey, he pleaded, his voice cracking, stripping away all pretense of the alpha male. The waiver, the deadline is 5 o'clock. If you do not sign off, The system triggers the default. The contractors, they will leave. The bond company will pull the surety. It will kill the project. I know, I said. I read the file. It seems you have leveraged everything, even things you do not technically own. I saw his eyes dart toward my mother again. A flash of panic so specific that it sent a chill down my spine. What did you do? Derek? I wondered, but I pushed that thought aside for a moment. I had him. You talk about the real world, I said. Well, welcome to it. In the real world, actions have consequences. In the real world, you do not get to treat people like garbage and then ask them for a favor. I tapped the screen of my phone, not hitting send yet, but hovering over the email to the committee. So, I said, let us talk about value. Let us talk about who deserves what. I turned to the crowd. Derek thinks Noah is a joke, I announced. But right now, Derek's entire career is hanging by a thread, and the only person holding the scissors is the mother of the boy he just mocked. The silence was broken by the sound of a chair scraping against concrete. Mallory had sat down, putting her head in her hands. Derek looked at me, his face twisting with a mix of rage and terror. He realized that the audience he loved so much was now witnessing his emasculation. He had built a stage for my son's humiliation, and I had turned it into his scaffold. You wouldn't, he ground out. Family. We are family. Funny, I said. I don't recall you treating Noah like family 5 minutes ago. I looked at Noah. He was watching me with wide eyes. He looked surprised. But more than that, he looked seen. For the first time, someone was fighting for him, not just comforting him after the fact, but actually fighting back. Apologize, I said to Derek. Derek blinked. What? Apologize to him, I commanded, in front of everyone. Tell him you were wrong. Tell him he deserves more than a pencil, and tell him exactly why you did it. Derek looked at Noah, then at the crowd, then at his business partners who were watching with keen interest. His pride was warring with his survival instinct. Lacey, this is ridiculous, he muttered. 30 minutes. Derek, I said, glancing at the time. The committee is waiting. Tick-tock. Derek turned to Noah. His face was red, blotchy with suppressed anger. He looked like he was swallowing broken glass. Derek started. He choked on the words. I shouldn't have. It was a bad joke. Okay? I am sorry. Not good enough, I said. Why did you do it? Derek glared at me. Because? Because? I prompted. Because he needs to toughen up, Derek shouted, unable to hold it in. Because he is soft. Because he walks around here like he is better than us just because he reads books and doesn't get his hands dirty. He thinks he is special. He is special, I said quietly. He is weak, Derek spat, and the world eats weak people. No, Derek, I said, looking at the sweating, desperate man before me. The world eats people who borrow more than they can pay back. The world eats people who build castles on quicksand. I looked down at my phone. And you know what? I said. I think it is time for the world to have a meal. Derek lunged. It was a clumsy, desperate move. He reached for my phone, his hand clawing at the air. Give me that, he screamed. I stepped back easily. He was slow, weighed down by his own panic. Mallory, he shouted. Control your sister. But Mallory did not move. She stayed with her head in her hands. I looked at Noah. Come on, I said. We are leaving the stage. I gestured toward the back of the pavilion, toward the quiet of the park beyond the party. I needed to separate us from the spectacle. I needed to check the file. I needed to see just how deep Derek's rot went. Because the look on his face when I mentioned leveraging things he didn't own told me that this wasn't just about a loan. This was about a crime. Where are you going? Derek yelled after us. Lacey, you can't walk away. The deadline. I paused and looked back over my shoulder. I am going to do my job. Derek, I said, I am going to assess the risk. And right now, the risk looks catastrophic. I grabbed Noah's arm and guided him away from the stunned silence of the graduation party, leaving Derek Voss standing alone in the center of the pavilion, surrounded by balloons and brisket, watching his empire begin to crumble in real time. The noise of the party faded as I pulled Noah around the corner of the brick pavilion structure. We ended up in the small, concrete service area used by the catering staff. It was quiet back here, smelling of damp earth and the exhaust from the generator humming a few feet away. The hysteria of Derek's performance and the uneasy murmuring of the guests were muffled by the thick masonry wall, reducing the drama out there to a low, unintelligible drone. I let go of Noah's arm. He leaned back against the rough brickwork, his chest rising and falling rapidly beneath the synthetic fabric of his graduation gown. He looked exhausted. It was the specific exhaustion of someone who had been holding his breath for 4 years and had finally exhaled. In his right hand, he was still clutching the yellow pencil. He looked at it for a moment, his eyes tracing the cheap gold lettering stamped on the wood. Then, with a deliberate, slow movement, he placed it on top of a stack of empty plastic crates next to him. He set it down gently, as if it were a piece of volatile evidence in a murder trial. "Mom," he said. His voice was steady now, stripped of the public performance he had been forced to maintain. "What are you going to do?" I looked at him. I saw the young man who had grown up in the shadow of loud, insecure men, learning to make himself invisible to survive. I saw the kindness in his eyes that Derek had mistaken for weakness. "I am going to do my job, Noah," I replied, smoothing a wrinkle on the shoulder of his gown. "I am going to do exactly what they pay me for. I am going to assess the risk. I am going to evaluate the character of the borrower, and I'm going to make a decision based on the facts." Noah looked down at his shoes. "He is going to hate you. Grandma is going to be furious. They will say you ruined the party." "The party was ruined the moment he decided to use you as a prop for his ego," I said firmly. "I am not starting a fire. Noah, I am just refusing to be the one who carries the water to put it out anymore." Noah nodded slowly. He picked at a loose thread on his sleeve. I could tell there was something else. There was a weight in the silence between us, something heavy that he was trying to find the strength to lift. "It does not matter what he thinks," Noah said softly. "He is right about one thing. Community college is practical. It is fine. I can make it work." I felt a pang of sadness, even now. After I had stood up for him, he was still trying to lower my expectations. He was still trying to soften the blow of his own existence. "Noah," I said, stepping closer and taking his hands, "you listen to me. There is no shame in community college. It is a wonderful path for millions of people. But I do not want you going there because Derek Voss convinced you that it is all you are good for. I want you to go where you want to go. I want you to choose your future, not have it assigned to you by a man who is drowning in debt." Noah looked up at me. His eyes were dark and intense. He bit his lip, debating something internally. "I am not going to community college, Mom." I paused. "Okay. That is fine. We can look at trade schools. We can look at gap years. We can—" "No," he interrupted. He took a deep breath, and the words rushed out in a torrent, as if he had been keeping them behind a dam. "I am not going to community college because I got in somewhere else. I got into Princeton." The world seemed to stop spinning. The hum of the generator faded into nothingness. "Princeton?" I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. "The Princeton? In New Jersey?" "Yes," Noah said. He reached into the inner pocket of his graduation gown, the pocket closest to his heart, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn at the creases. As if it had been folded and unfolded 100 times, he handed it to me, and I got the financial aid package. It is a full scholarship. Mom, tuition, room, board, everything is covered. I took the paper. My hands were shaking. I unfolded it, and there it was. The official letterhead. The congratulations. The numbers that added up to zero cost for my family. I stared at the letter, tears instantly blurring my vision. Pride, hot and overwhelming, surged through my chest. My son, My quiet, bookish, overlooked son had achieved something that no one in our entire family tree had ever achieved. He had walked through a door that most people only dream about, but then, the pride was instantly followed by a sharp, agonizing stab of pain. I looked up at him, bewildered. Noah, you have had this for weeks? The acceptance dates were last month. Why? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone? Noah looked away, staring at the brick wall. Because I knew what would happen, he said, his voice flat. I knew what Derek would say. If I told them I got into an Ivy League, he would have turned it into a joke. He would have said I only got in because of diversity quotas. Or he would have said I would turn into a snob. He would have made me feel guilty for leaving. He would have called me the professor in that tone he uses, and everyone would have laughed. He gestured toward the noise of the party on the other side of the wall. I just wanted to get through today, he whispered. I wanted to get through the party without giving him any more ammunition. I was going to tell you tomorrow, when we were alone, when I was safe. My heart broke. It shattered into a million pieces right there in the service area. My son had learned to hide his joy to survive. He had learned that in the Figueroa family, excellence was a target. He had learned that happiness was something you had to smuggle out of the house like contraband, lest it be confiscated and destroyed by the insecurities of the adults around him. I had failed him by keeping the peace, by smiling at the dinner table for years while Derek made his snide comments. I had taught my son that his success was a burden. Oh, Noah, I choked out. I pulled him into a hug, squeezing him so tight I thought I might crush him. I buried my face in his shoulder, smelling the synthetic fabric and the soap he used. I am so sorry. I am so sorry that you felt you had to hide this. He hugged me back, stiffly at first, then melting into the embrace. He was taller than me now, but he felt so small in that moment. It is okay, Mom, he mumbled into my hair. It is not okay, I said, pulling back to look at him, gripping his shoulders. It is not okay that you had to protect yourself from your own family. It is not okay that you had to treat a full ride to Princeton like a dirty secret. Noah wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He looked at the pencil on the crates again. I used him, you know, Noah said. A strange, small smile touched his lips. What do you mean? I asked. Derek, Noah said. I used him for my admissions essay. I stared at him. You wrote about Derek? I wrote about the noise, Noah corrected. I wrote about growing up in a room where the loudest voice is always the most wrong. I wrote about how people try to make you small so they can feel big. I told the admissions officers that I learned how to listen because I was never allowed to speak. I told them that I wanted to study psychology so I could understand why people like my uncle build cages for everyone else. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and showed me a voice memo app. There were dozens of files. Thanksgiving 2023, Christmas Eve, birthday dinner, graduation morning. I recorded him, Noah said. Not to get him in trouble. I needed to listen to it later. I needed to analyze it, to remind myself that what he was saying wasn't true. It was just data. It was just a pattern of behavior. I looked at the list of recordings. My son hadn't just endured the abuse. He had dissected it. He had turned his trauma into a research project. He had taken the stones Derek threw at him and built a road out of town. I looked at him with a new kind of awe. He wasn't just smart. He was formidable. He possessed a quiet strength that Derek could never understand, because Derek's strength was all external. Loud noises, big cars, expensive suits. Noah's strength was internal. It was a fortress. You are incredible, I whispered. You are absolutely incredible. I just didn't want to be like him, Noah said simply. That was my only goal. I looked at the yellow pencil one last time. It sat there on the plastic crate, looking pathetic and small, a symbol of a future that didn't exist. Well, I said, wiping my own tears and straightening my spine. You are not like him. You are everything he wishes he could be. You are real. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a sharp, insistent vibration that cut through the emotional haze. I looked down. It was Jenna again. Lacey, the committee is seated. The VP of Credit is asking where the recommendation is. We are 5 minutes past the start time. They are looking at the Voss Stone file on the screen. I need a go or no go. Now. I took a deep breath. The air in the service area felt cleaner now. The humidity was still there, but the heaviness was gone. The confusion was gone. I looked at Noah. I have to do this, I said. I have to make a call, and it is going to change things. It is going to make things very loud and very ugly for a while. Grandma is going to cry. Mallory is going to be scared. Derek is going to scream. I paused, searching his face. Are you ready for that? I asked. Are you ready to stop hiding? Noah looked at the acceptance letter in my hand. Then he looked at the pencil. He reached out and flicked the pencil with his finger. It rolled off the crate and fell into the dirt between the bricks. He didn't look down to see where it landed. I am ready, Noah said. I am done being quiet. Do you trust me? I asked. I trust you, he said, and for the first time all day, for the first time in years, the fear was gone from his eyes. There was only anticipation. Good, I said. I unlocked my phone. I tapped the icon for the secure banking app. I opened the email draft that Jenna had prepared. I thought about the Crown Line Quarter project. I thought about the house of cards Derek had built. I thought about the liquidity ratios and the debt service coverage. But mostly, I thought about the pencil. I thought about the way Derek had smiled when he tossed it at my son's chest. I thought about the laughter of my family, bought and paid for by a man who was morally and financially bankrupt. I was a risk analyst. My job was to protect the bank from bad investments. My job was to identify toxic assets and remove them from the portfolio before they could infect the rest of the system. Derek Voss was a toxic asset, and I was about to write him off. Wait here for a second, I told Noah. I need to look at one last thing in the file before I pull the trigger. There is something about Grandma's house that I need to verify. Noah frowned. Grandma's house? What does that have to do with Derek's business? That is what I am going to find out, I said grimly. But I have a feeling that the pencil wasn't the only lie told today. I stepped away from him, moving slightly deeper into the shadows of the service area, and opened the full PDF attachment of the loan agreement. I scrolled past the interest rates. I scrolled past the repayment schedules. I went straight to the section titled Collateral and Guarantors. My finger hovered over the screen. I needed to be sure. I needed to be absolutely certain before I destroyed my brother-in-law's life. I zoomed in on page 42, and there it was. The screen of my phone was no longer just a communication device. It was a crime scene. I stood in the shadows of the service area, the brick wall rough against my shoulder, and I let the world around me dissolve. The humidity, the smell of the catering truck, even Noah's heavy breathing beside me faded into the background. I was in the zone now. This was the headspace I occupied from 9 to 5. Monday through Friday, it was a cold, binary world where numbers did not lie, even if the men who wrote them down did. I opened the folder labeled VossStone_Financials_Q2. The first thing that hit me was the cash flow statement. It was a mess. A construction project like Crown Line Quarter should have a rhythmic heartbeat of capital. Money comes in from the bank draw. Money goes out to the trades. It is a predictable cycle. But Derek's ledger looked like a cardiac arrest. There were massive injections of cash followed by immediate, erratic withdrawals that did not align with the construction schedule. I scrolled down to the accounts payable section. My thumb hovered over the screen. Something was wrong. My eyes, trained to spot anomalies in thousands of spreadsheets, latched onto a discrepancy in row 42. Invoice number 4022. It was a payment for $55,000 to a concrete supplier called Carolina Foundation Solutions. It was dated March 12th. I scrolled down 3 more pages. There it was again. Invoice number 4022. Same amount, $55,000. Same date. But this time, The payee was listed as Voss Consulting Group, LLC. My stomach turned over. It was a duplicate invoice scheme. It was the oldest trick in the book. You pay the vendor to keep them working, but you also pay yourself using the same invoice number to trick the accounting software into balancing the books temporarily. It was clumsy. It was desperate. It was the kind of fraud you commit when you need cash today to pay off a debt from yesterday. I looked at the site progress report attached to the draw request. The photos showed the framing was 80% complete. The narrative claimed they were ready for roofing, but the inspector's notes, which Derek probably thought no one read, flagged that the lumber delivery was 3 weeks late. He was billing the bank for work that had not happened yet. He was pulling down funds for a roof that did not exist. Then a new message from Jenna popped up at the top of my screen. Alert. The surety partner just called the VP. They are freaking out. Lacey, they are demanding a collateral top-up within 24 hours, or they are pulling the bond. They said Derek promised them additional security last week. Additional security. The phrase made my blood run cold. When a developer is maxed out, when the bank will not lend another dime and the credit cards are declined, they start looking for things to pawn. They start looking for assets that are not theirs. I backed out of the cash flow statement and opened the guarantor agreements folder. I knew Derek's assets. I knew about his house, his car, his boat. They were all already leaned to the hilt. There was nothing left to give. So what did he offer the surety company to keep them quiet? I opened the document titled secondary_collateral_addendum_signed.pdf. The file loaded slowly, the little blue circle spinning for an agonizing 3 seconds. When the image resolved, I felt like someone had punched me in the throat. It was a deed of trust, a lien against a residential property. The address was typed clearly at the top. 4209 Oakwood Lane, Charlotte, North Carolina. I stopped breathing. That was not Derek's house. That was not an investment property. That was my mother's house. It was the house I grew up in. The house my father had paid off 10 years ago before he died. It was the only asset my mother had in the world. It was her safety net. It was her retirement. And it was listed here as collateral for the Voss-Stone Crown Line Quarter project. I scrolled to the bottom of the page. My fingers trembling so hard, I almost dropped the phone. There were 2 signatures. One was Derek's, big, looping, arrogant. The other was smaller. It was written in blue ink, Lorraine Figueroa. I stared at the signature. I zoomed in until the pixels started to blur. It looked like her handwriting. It had the shaky L she had developed since her arthritis flared up. It had the little loop on the G in Figueroa. To a bank clerk who did not know her, it would look perfect. It would look legitimate. But I was not a bank clerk. I was her daughter. I looked at the way the F crossed. My mother always lifted her pen before crossing the F. There was always a microscopic gap in the ink. This F was crossed in one fluid motion. And the date? The document was dated April 14th. On April 14th, my mother was in the hospital getting her cataract surgery. Her eyes were taped shut. She could not have read a menu, let alone a complex legal document. It was a forgery. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Derek had not just insulted my son. He had not just cooked his books. He had stolen my mother's home. He had forged her signature to secure a loan he knew he could not pay back. If this project went under, and the financials told me it was days away from collapse, the bank would not just come for Derek. They would come for Lorraine. They would foreclose on the house she had lived in for 40 years. He was gambling with her life to keep his ego afloat. "Mom?" Noah whispered. He was watching my face, and he must have seen the horror there. "What is it?" I could not speak. I was too busy processing the level of betrayal. It was reptilian. It was sociopathic. Suddenly, a voice shattered the quiet of the service area. "I said I would handle it. Stop calling me." It was Derek. He was close. He was just on the other side of the brick wall, near the parking lot entrance. He must have stepped away from the party to take the call from the partner who had threatened to show up. I motioned for Noah to stay perfectly still. We stood there, frozen in the shadows, listening to the man who had just played the king unravel into a beggar. "Listen to me. Mike," Derek's voice came again. High-pitched and thready, it was stripped of all its bass, all its confidence. "You cannot pull the crew. You cannot do this to me today. I am at a family function. I have the waiver coming. My sister-in-law is handling it. She is going to sign off. I told you. She is in my pocket. She is in my pocket." The rage that flared in my chest was white-hot. "No, I did not tell her about the shortfall," Derek screamed, losing control. "If I tell her, she kills the deal. I just need to get the signature, and then we can shift the funds from the new draw to pay the old invoices. It is a shell game, Mike. Everyone does it. Just give me 24 hours. There was a silence as the person on the other end spoke. Then Derek's voice again, quieter this time, desperate. I know the bond is an issue, but I secured it. I put up the old lady's house. Yeah, she doesn't know. Who cares if she knows? The project is going to hit big, and I will release the lien before she even checks her mail. It is victimless. Mike, just, please, don't call the lawyers yet." I looked at Noah. His eyes were wide plates of shock. He had heard it all. He had heard his uncle confess to fraud, to forgery, to betraying his own mother-in-law. "He stole Grandma's house," Noah whispered, the words barely forming. "Yes," I said, my voice ice. "He did. I was about to step out. I was about to walk around that corner and end him. I was going to call the police, the bank, the sheriff, everyone. But then, the door to the service area creaked open. I spun around, adrenaline spiking. It was Mallory. My sister looked like a ghost. Her skin was the color of old parchment. Her lipstick, usually perfect, was smudged at the corner of her mouth as if she had been wiping away vomit. She was holding herself up against the doorframe, shaking so hard her bracelets rattled. "Lacey," she gasped when she saw me. She stepped inside and let the door close, plunging us back into semi-darkness. "Mallory," I said, stepping in front of Noah to shield him, though I didn't know from what. "You need to know what your husband just did." "I know," Mallory sobbed. Tears were streaming down her face now, carving tracks through her foundation. "I know, Lacey. I heard him on the phone. But it is worse. It is so much worse." She reached into her purse. Her hands were fumbling, clumsy with terror. She pulled out a white business envelope. It was crumpled, as if she had grabbed it in a hurry. "I went to his car," she whispered. "He left his keys on the table when he went to do the speech. I wanted to see if... I don't know what I was looking for. I just knew he was lying. I found this in the glove box, hidden under the manual." She held the envelope out to me. "Read it. Please. Lacey, read it." I took the envelope. It was already open. I pulled out the papers inside. The first document was a demand letter from a law firm representing the general contractor. It was dated 3 days ago. It stated clearly that they were preparing to file a criminal complaint for check fraud. But the second piece of paper was not a legal document. It was a printout of an email draft. It was an email Derek had written to his equity partners. It was dated for tomorrow morning. Subject: project delay/unforeseen circumstances. I began to read the text, and a chill deeper than the one from the forgery settled into my bones. "Gentlemen, I regret to inform you that we will not be able to make the site meeting on Monday. As you may know, my family is going through a significant crisis. My nephew, Noah, has been involved in a serious legal incident following his graduation party. We are dealing with police and lawyers. The emotional toll on my wife and mother-in-law is severe, and I have to step away from the project management for a few days to handle the family fallout. I ask for your patience regarding the draw request. The delay is not financial. It is personal. We are devastated by what Noah has done." I lowered the paper. I felt like I was floating. The world was tilting on its axis. He had not just planned to steal the money. He had not just planned to steal the house. He had planned to frame my son. He was going to invent a legal incident. He was going to use Noah, the quiet, gentle boy he had bullied for years, as the scapegoat for his own incompetence. He was going to tell his investors that the reason the project was failing was not because he was a thief, but because he was a good family man, distracted by a delinquent nephew. He was going to destroy Noah's reputation to buy himself 3 more days of excuses. He was going to blame Noah, Mallory whispered, her voice breaking. He was going to tell everyone that Noah got arrested or something, just to explain why he didn't have the money on Monday. I looked at Noah. He was reading the paper over my shoulder. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He was staring at the words with a look of absolute, cold understanding. This was the man who had handed him a pencil. This was the man who had told him he was worthless. Derek Voss wasn't just a bad businessman. He was a predator. He was willing to consume everyone around him, his wife, his mother-in-law, his nephew, just to keep his facade from cracking. I looked at the pencil that was still lying in the dirt near the crates. "Okay," I said. The word sounded loud in the small space. I looked at Mallory. "You found this?" "Yes," she said. "And you are giving it to me?" Mallory looked at me. For the first time in her life, the fear of her husband was outweighed by the love for her sister and nephew. She nodded. "I can't do it anymore. Lacey," she said, "I can't let him hurt Mom. I can't let him hurt Noah. Take him down. Please, just take him down." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Right next to the phone that held the evidence of the forgery, I had the motive, I had the method, I had the witness. "Noah," I said, turning to my son, "wipe your face. Fix your tie." He did as I asked, smoothing his gown. "Mallory," I said, "go back out there. Sit next to Mom. Hold her hand. Don't say a word to Derek. Just wait." "What are you going to do?" Mallory asked, terrified. I checked the time on my phone. Committee meeting in session. I typed a single line to Jenna. "I am joining the call. Put me on speaker. I have an update on the Voss Stone collateral." I looked up at my family. "I am going to go finish his speech," I said. "He wanted to talk about the future? Fine, let us talk about his..." I pushed open the heavy metal door. The sunlight hit me like a spotlight. The noise of the party washed over me. Derek was standing near the buffet, laughing nervously into his phone, trying to charm the man who was threatening to sue him. He didn't see me coming, but he would. Oh, he would. I walked back into the pavilion, and the atmosphere was fragile. The laughter had died down, replaced by a low buzzing murmur of confusion. People were eating their coleslaw and pulled pork with their heads down, sensing that the roast had gone too far, but unsure of how to exit the awkwardness. Derek was standing near the cooler, phone pressed to his ear, his back to the crowd. He was hunched over, his free hand chopping the air as he whispered furiously into the device. He looked like a cornered animal trying to negotiate with a trap. I stopped in the center of the open space, right where he had humiliated my son 10 minutes ago. Noah stood beside me, silent and watchful. Mallory slipped past us to sit next to our mother, taking her hand. "Derek," I said. My voice was not a shout. It was a statement of fact. It carried across the humid air, cutting through the murmurs and the distant traffic noise. Derek spun around. He saw me standing there, phone in hand. He saw the look on my face, not anger, but the cold, clinical detachment of an executioner. He ended his call abruptly and shoved the phone into his pocket. "Lacey, I told you. We will talk later," he snapped. Trying to regain his alpha posture, he forced a smile for the benefit of the audience. "Sorry, folks. Just a little business hiccup. You know how it is. Always working, right?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "We are not talking later. We are talking now." I turned to look at the guests. My aunts, my uncles, the cousins who had laughed at the pencil. They looked back at me, wary. "You all thought it was funny," I said, addressing the room. "You laughed because you thought a pencil was a clever joke. You laughed because Derek told you my son wasn't worth anything more than a piece of wood." I paused. letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. But while you were laughing, I continued, turning my gaze back to Derek, someone here was using this family as collateral for a loan he can't pay back. My mother, Lorraine, stood up. Her face was a mask of confusion. Lacey, what are you saying? What collateral? I looked at Derek. Tell her, Derek, tell her about the house. Derek's face went white. Lacey, shut up. Don't listen to her. Lorraine, she is hysterical. She is just mad about the joke. Tell her, I repeated, stepping closer. Tell her whose house is listed as the secondary security for the Crown Line Quarter project. Stop it, Derek shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. You are making this up. You are trying to ruin me. But he was sweating. Rivers of perspiration were running down his temples. His eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally, but there were none. I am not making it up, I said, lifting my phone. I have the deed of trust right here, signed by you, and signed by Lorraine Figueroa. I looked at my mother. Mom, did you sign a document pledging your home to Derek's bank on April 14th? Lorraine blinked, her mouth opening and closing. April 14th? No, I was having my eye surgery. I couldn't see anything for 3 days. A gasp went through the room. It wasn't a theatrical gasp. It was the sharp intake of breath that happens when a predator is revealed in the midst of the herd. The cousins who had been filming for Instagram lowered their phones. The uncle who had whistled earlier looked down at his shoes. He forged it, I said, my voice flat. He forged your signature, Mom. He put your house, the house Dad paid for, on the line because he is broke. And if I don't stop him today, the bank is going to take it. Liar, Derek screamed. He lunged forward, but he didn't get far. A loud, piercing ringtone cut through the air. It was coming from Derek's pocket. He froze. He knew that ringtone. We all did. It was the default ringtone for a priority contact. He didn't answer it. He just stared at me, his chest heaving. Answer it, Derek, I said. It is your equity partner, isn't it? The one you were just lying to? Derek didn't move. The phone kept ringing. Ring, ring, ring. It was like a siren. If you don't answer it, I said, I will answer mine. I am sure Jenna would love to patch him through to the committee. Derek pulled the phone out with a shaking hand. He swiped the screen and put it to his ear. Mike? Listen, I can explain. He didn't get to finish. The voice on the other end was loud. So loud that in the quiet of the pavilion, with everyone holding their breath, we could hear the tinny, furious sounds leaking from the speaker. Put me on speaker, Derek, the voice roared. I know you are with her. Put me on speaker. Derek looked at me, trapped. He tapped the speaker button. I am here, Mike, Derek whispered. Is the waiver signed? The voice demanded. It was a man's voice, rough with panic and anger. Because I just got a call from the surety agent. They are saying the collateral document looks irregular. They are saying they are sending a fraud investigator on Monday. The crowd flinched. The word fraud hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I am handling it, Derek stammered. Handling it? The partner yelled. If I don't see that waiver by 5 o'clock today, I am pulling my capital. I am out. Derek, and I am calling the district attorney about that signature. I am not going to jail for your mess. The call ended with a violent click. Silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. The guests at the party, the people who had spent the last hour worshiping Derek, were now looking at him as if he were radioactive. They were backing away, physically creating distance between themselves and the man who was about to be indicted. They didn't want to be witnesses. They didn't want to be accomplices. Derek stood there, holding the dead phone. He looked small. He looked deflated. The suit that had seemed so expensive now looked like a costume. It is not true, he whispered, addressing the room, but his voice had no power left. It is just, business is complicated. You guys don't understand high finance. We understand stealing, Mallory said. The voice was quiet, but it came from the head table. My sister stood up. She was trembling, but her eyes were dry. She was still holding our mother's hand. Mallory? Derek said, turning to her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Honey, tell them I do this for us. Tell them. No, Mallory said. She stepped out from behind the table. I am sorry. Derek, I can't. She looked at the crowd. I knew, she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. I knew the project was in trouble. He told me months ago, but I didn't know about the house. I didn't know he stole from Mom. She looked at Derek, and the look of betrayal on her face was devastating. But that is not even the worst part, Mallory said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled email draft she had found in the car. He was going to blame Noah. Mallory, don't, Derek started, stepping toward her. Stay back, I shouted, stepping between them. Mallory held up the paper. He wrote an email to his partners, she said to the family. He was going to tell them that the reason the money was gone was because Noah had legal trouble. He was going to say Noah got arrested. He was going to use a fake family crisis to cover up his theft. A collective gasp went through the room. This was lower than fraud. This was moral bankruptcy. And do you know why? Mallory asked, tears finally spilling over. Do you know what he told me last night, when I asked him why he is always so mean to Noah? She looked at her husband, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. He said, I have to keep him down, Mal. I have to drown him out, because when he is in the room, he makes me look like a fake. Derek flinched as if she had thrown boiling water on him. The truth was out. The secret engine of his cruelty was exposed. He didn't hate Noah because Noah was weak. He hated Noah because Noah was authentic. Noah was smart without bragging. Noah was kind without an agenda. And next to that, Derek felt like exactly what he was, a fraud in a fancy suit. Derek looked around the room. He saw the disgust in my mother's eyes. He saw the horror in his friends' faces. He saw the judgment in the eyes of the family he had tried so hard to impress. Derek stammered, I built this family. I paid for this party. I paid for everything. You paid for it with money you didn't have, I shot back. And you tried to pay for it with my mother's house. Then, Noah moved. He stepped out from behind me. He walked right up to Derek. He was still wearing his graduation gown. He still looked like a boy. But he carried himself like a man. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He just looked up at his uncle with a calm, penetrating gaze. You are scared, Noah said. It wasn't a question. It was an observation. You are scared because you know that no matter how much money you pretend to have, you are still empty, Noah said softly. You hate me because I don't need to pretend. I don't need a microphone to be heard, and I don't need to tear people down to feel tall. Derek stared at him, his mouth opened, but his wit failed him. There was no joke to make. There was no punchline that could fix this. The community college boy was dissecting him with the precision of a surgeon, and Derek had no defense against the truth. You are right about one thing. Uncle Derek, Noah said, I am not like you, and thank God for that. Derek looked at Noah, then at me, then at the silent crowd. The silence was deafening. It was the sound of 100 years of respect evaporating in an instant. He was alone, completely, utterly alone. And the clock on my phone ticked over to 4:30. Time is up, Derek, I said. The committee is waiting. The silence in the pavilion was absolute. But inside my head, the noise was deafening. It was the sound of gears turning, of risk matrices being calculated, and of a strategy forming in real time. It would have been easy to just scream at Derek. It would have been satisfying to flip the table, throw the cheap pencil back in his face, and walk away while the police sirens grew louder. But that was not how I operated. That was an emotional reaction. And emotional reactions caused collateral damage. If I destroyed Derek right this second, without precision, the blast radius would take out everyone. The innocent contractors who were waiting for their checks on Monday morning would be stiffed. The employees at Voss who had families to feed would be blindsided. And most importantly, my mother's house was still technically legally bound to a sinking ship. If I just denied the waiver and walked away, the automated banking software would seize everything, including the roof over Lorraine Figueroa's head. I needed to be surgical. I needed to be the risk officer, not the angry sister-in-law. I lifted my phone back to my ear. Jenna was still on the line, breathing quietly, waiting for my command. "Jenna," I said, turning my back on Derek but keeping my voice loud enough for Mallory to hear. "I need you to execute a specific protocol. Listen to me very carefully." "I am ready, Lacey," Jenna replied, her voice crisp and professional. "I need you to flag the collateral addendum for the Voss account as fraudulent," I said. "Do not, I repeat, do not process the default judgment against the secondary guarantor yet. Isolate the residential property at 4209 Oakwood Lane. Initiate a fraud investigation ticket and attach it to the primary borrower's file immediately. I want the lien on that house frozen pending a legal review of the signature." "Understood," Jenna said. "I am flagging the deed of trust as disputed/potential forgery. That stops the foreclosure algorithm from triggering on the mother's house. But Lacey, what about the commercial assets? What about the construction site?" "Let the commercial assets fall," I said coldly. "The project is insolvent, but I want you to contact the disbursement team. See if we can release a direct payment to the general contractor for verified work only. Bypass Derek's operating account. I do not want the workers punishing us because the developer is a thief. Can we do a direct vendor payout?" "It is irregular," Jenna admitted, "but given the fraud alert, I can get the VP to sign off on it to avoid a mechanic's lien on the land. We can pay the guys who actually poured the concrete." "Do it," I said. "Protect the innocent parties. Isolate the toxicity." I hung up the phone. I turned back to the family. My mother was sitting on the bench, looking at her hands as if they didn't belong to her. She looked aged, 10 years older than she had been this morning. She finally understood. The favorite son-in-law, the man she had defended, the man she had laughed along with, had tried to sell her out to save his own skin. Derek was watching me with a look of pure hatred. He realized what I was doing. I wasn't just stopping him. I was dismantling his leverage. I was taking away his hostages. I looked at Mallory. My sister was still standing there, holding the crumpled email draft, tears streaming down her face. She looked like she was vibrating, terrified of the step she had just taken, but unable to go back. "Mallory," I said, stepping toward her. "I need you to listen to me." She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "I am going to fix the house situation," I told her. "Mom is going to be safe, but you need to make a choice right now. Not tomorrow, not next week. Right now." I gestured to Derek, who was standing alone by the buffet table, looking like a king in exile. "If you leave with me," I said, "I will help you. I will get you a lawyer. I will help you figure out the finances. But you have to be done. You have to be 100% done. You cannot protect him anymore. You cannot lie for him anymore. If you have anything else, any other texts, any other emails, any other evidence, you have to give it to me now. If I go into that committee meeting and find out there is more fraud that you knew about, I cannot save you." Mallory swallowed hard. She looked at Derek. "Don't do it, Mal," Derek growled. It was a low, threatening sound. "You are my wife. Spousal privilege. You don't have to say anything." Mallory looked at him. She looked at the sweat on his forehead. She looked at the cruel set of his mouth. And then she looked at Noah, standing tall in his graduation gown, the boy Derek had tried to frame. Something in Mallory snapped into place. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Spousal privilege doesn't cover fraud, Derek," Mallory said quietly, And it definitely doesn't cover abusing my family. She reached into her purse again. She pulled out her own phone. Her fingers flew across the screen. I am sending you the screenshots, Lacey, Mallory said. All of them. My phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. I opened the messages. They were from Derek to Mallory, dated over the last 6 months. I read one out loud, my voice echoing in the silent pavilion. January 15th, I read. Derek to Mallory. Just told the bank inspector to look at the west wall foundation. The east wall is cracked. But I put some drywall up to hide it. If we get the draw released, I can fix it later. Don't let Noah near the site. He asks too many questions. I scrolled to the next one. March 3rd, I read. Derek to Mallory. Lacey is asking for updated financials. I am going to doctor the spreadsheet. If she calls you, just tell her she is being a jealous bitch. Tell her she hates that we are successful. Play the victim, Mal. Crying usually shuts her up. The crowd gasped. My Aunt Myra put a hand over her mouth. They had all heard Mallory defend Derek in the past. They had all heard Mallory say that Lacey was difficult. Now they knew the script had been written by Derek. I looked up at Derek. You manipulated your wife into gaslighting her own sister, I said. You used her loyalty as a weapon against my due diligence. Derek was cornered. The evidence was overwhelming. He looked around the pavilion, realizing he had lost the court of public opinion, so he tried the only tactic he had left. He tried to bully me professionally. He straightened his jacket. He put on his boardroom face. It was a shaky, transparent mask, but he wore it anyway. Fine, Derek spat. You want to play hardball. Lacey, go ahead. Deny the waiver. Call the fraud unit. But do you think Sable Point Bank is going to be happy when I tell them their senior risk officer has a personal vendetta against a client? Do you think they will like it when I tell them you used confidential banking information to settle a family grudge at a birthday party? He took a step toward me, trying to loom. I will sue you for breach of privacy, Derek threatened. I will file a complaint with the ethics board. I will tell them you violated conflict of interest protocols. I will drag your name through the mud until you can't get a job as a teller. It was a vicious threat. In the banking world, a conflict of interest accusation could end a career. He was betting that I valued my job more than I valued justice. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Go ahead, I said calmly. File the complaint. Derek, please. I welcome it. I took a step closer to him, invading his space until I was staring up into his eyes. Because here is the thing about risk assessment, I said. It is all about documentation, and my documentation is perfect. I didn't access your file until the committee sent me the alert. I didn't look at your collateral until the surety company flagged the issue. Everything I have done in the last 20 minutes is strictly by the book. I am mitigating loss. I am identifying fraud. I am protecting the bank's assets. I smiled, and it was a smile devoid of any warmth. You think you can blemish my reputation? I asked. Derek, your file does that for you. You forged a signature. You cooked the books. You defrauded a supplier. You are not a victim of a vendetta. You are a criminal who got caught. And frankly, the bank is going to give me a bonus for catching you before you stole another $1 million. Derek's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at me, and he saw the truth. He saw that I was better at this than him. He saw that while he was playing checkers with people's emotions, I had been playing chess with the facts. He slumped. The fight went out of him. He looked like a balloon that had been pricked. Lacey, he whined, his voice small. Please, I can fix it. Just give me the waiver. I will pay off the house first. I swear. No, I said. You had your chance. You had 4 years of chances. I felt a movement beside me. Noah was there. He reached out and took my hand. In his other hand, he held the yellow pencil. He had picked it up from the dirt where he had dropped it earlier. He held it out to me. Here, Mom, Noah said. His voice was clear and strong. I think you should have this. I looked at the pencil. The cheap, yellow wood, the unsharpened tip, the symbol of everything Derek had tried to make us believe about ourselves. "I have held on to it long enough," Noah said. "I don't need it anymore. I know what I am worth." I took the pencil. It felt light in my hand, insignificant, but as I held it, I felt the weight of it shift. It was no longer a gift of shame. It was a gavel. I turned to the crowd. I held the pencil up high, just like Derek had done. "Look at this," I said to my family. They looked. They were silent, their eyes wide. "You all laughed," I said. "When Derek handed this to my son, you laughed. You thought it was funny that a grown man would try to humiliate an 18-year-old boy? You thought it was acceptable to treat Noah like he was less than you." I walked along the edge of the tables, making eye contact with every single person who had chuckled. My Uncle Steve, my Aunt Myra, my cousins. "You let him do it," I said, "because he had money, because he had a loud voice, because you were afraid that if you didn't laugh, he would turn on you next." I stopped in front of my mother. She was weeping now, Mallory holding her. "Well, look where that got you," I said. "The man you were so afraid to offend was willing to sell you out for $50,000. I turned back to the center of the room. "Derek wanted to teach Noah a lesson today," I said. "He wanted to teach him that his value was determined by what other people thought of him. He wanted to teach him that he was small." I gripped the pencil tight. "But today, Noah learned a different lesson," I said, "and I hope you all learned it too. Value isn't determined by the loudest voice in the room. It isn't determined by a fancy car or a fake empire." I looked at Noah, beaming with pride. "Value is integrity," I said. "Value is truth, and value is knowing that you don't need anyone in this family to confirm your worth." I looked at Derek one last time. "You gave him a pencil because you said he could be erased," I said. "But you are the one who is about to be written out of the story." My phone buzzed again. A long, sustained vibration. It was the conference line. The committee was live. The vice president, the chief risk officer, the legal counsel. They were all there, waiting for my voice. "That is my call," I said. I looked at Jenna's text. "They are on the line, waiting for you. Lacey." I looked at Derek. He was staring at the ground, defeated. "Noah, get the car," I said. "Mallory, get Mom. We are leaving." I swiped the screen to answer the call. I held the phone up to my ear. "This is Lacey Figueroa," I said into the silence of the pavilion, my voice echoing with finality. "I am joining the line." I stepped away from the stunned silence of the pavilion and walked toward a cluster of oak trees near the edge of the parking lot. The air here was slightly cooler, filtered by the shade, but my skin was still prickling with the heat of the confrontation. I held the phone to my ear, pressing it tight against my head to block out the distant sounds of traffic and the murmuring of my family. On the line, the world was different. It was the world of high finance, a place of steel and glass and absolute consequences. I could hear the rustle of papers and the low hum of a conference room speakerphone in downtown Charlotte. "Ms. Figueroa," the deep, gravelly voice of the credit committee chairman spoke. "We are in session. We have the Voss Stone file open. We are looking at the covenant waiver request. The deadline is close of business today. What is your recommendation?" I took a deep breath. I looked back at the pavilion. I saw Derek standing alone, a man on an island of his own making. I saw my mother weeping softly in Mallory's arms. I saw Noah, standing tall, watching me with a look of quiet trust. I looked at the pencil in my hand, the cheap, yellow wood, the unsharpened lead, the symbol of everything Derek had tried to reduce us to. I turned back to the trees. "Mr. Chairman," I said, my voice steady and devoid of hesitation. "I have reviewed the file. I have analyzed the cash flow statements, the site progress reports, and the collateral documentation." "And," the chairman prompted, "I am formally recommending that we deny the waiver," I said. There was a pause on the line. Denying a waiver on a project of this size was a nuclear option. It meant immediate default. It meant lawyers. It meant liquidation. On what grounds? The chief risk officer asked. The borrower claims the liquidity issue is temporary. The borrower is lying, I said, the words tasting like justice. I have identified significant irregularities in the accounts payable ledger. There are duplicate invoices suggesting a shell game to inflate cash positions. The construction schedule is falsified. The draw requests do not match the physical progress on site. I gripped the phone tighter. Furthermore, I continued, I have reason to believe that the secondary collateral, the residential property listed in the addendum, was secured through fraudulent means. The signature on the deed of trust appears to be forged. I have flagged it for the fraud unit. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. It was the silence of a corporation realizing it had been exposed to a toxic asset. Fraud, the chairman repeated. The word was heavy, like a stone dropping into water. You are certain? I am certain, I said. The borrower is insolvent, and his character is compromised. He is not a partner we can do business with. If we extend this waiver, we are throwing good money after bad. We need to cut the line, now. Understood, the chairman said. I could hear the scratching of a pen. Motion to deny the waiver and trigger the default clause. Do I have a second? Second, another voice said immediately. The motion carries, the chairman announced. The waiver is denied. The acceleration notice is being generated by the system as we speak. Legal will be notified to secure the site on Monday morning. Good work. Lacey. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. It was done. I stood there for a moment, listening to the cicadas screaming in the trees. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not joy. It was not triumph. It was relief. It was the feeling of a heavy burden finally being set down after 4 long years. Then, from the pavilion, a sound erupted. It was a howl. I turned around. Derek was staring at his phone. The notification had arrived. The automated email from the bank system. Notice of default. Acceleration of debt. Immediate demand for payment. He looked up, and his eyes found me across the grass. His face was a mask of twisted, red fury. He did not look like a businessman anymore. He looked like a ruin. You! He screamed. He charged across the grass. He moved with a clumsy, desperate speed, stumbling over his own feet. You did it! He roared, his voice cracking. You killed the deal. You ruined everything. He reached the edge of the pavilion, but he stopped short. He stopped because he saw something that terrified him more than the bank. He saw the faces of the family. No one moved to help him. No one stood up to defend him. My Uncle Steve, who had whistled at the pencil joke, crossed his arms and looked away. My Aunt Myra was studying the tablecloth. The cousins were silent. Derek stood panting, looking from face to face. She ruined us! Derek yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me as I walked back into the structure. She just bankrupted this family. She is jealous. She is crazy. Stop it, Derek, I said calmly, stepping back into the circle. I didn't bankrupt the family. I stopped you from robbing it. I walked over to the bench where my mother was sitting. She looked up at me, her eyes swollen. She looked like a child who had woken up in a strange place. Mom, I said gently. I knelt down in front of her. I opened my phone again and brought up the image of the deed of trust. I zoomed in on the signature. Look, I said. Lorraine looked at the screen. She saw her name. She saw the date. She saw the heavy, confident ink strokes that were trying so hard to look like her shaky hand. I didn't sign that, she whispered, her voice trembling. I was in the hospital. You were with me. Lacey, you held my hand. I know, I said. He signed it. Mom, he tried to take your house. Lorraine looked at Derek. Her gaze was not angry. It was heartbroken. It was the look of a woman realizing that the affection she had thought was genuine was actually just a long, slow con. How could you? She asked. It was a whisper. But in the silence, it sounded like a gunshot. I loved you like a son. Derek, I defended you. I took your side. Derek stepped back, shaking his head. Lorraine, listen, it was just a formality. I was going to pay it back. You were never going to know. That makes it worse, Mallory said. My sister stood up. She wiped her face. The tears were gone. In their place was a cold, hard clarity. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had feared for so long. You were never going to tell her, Mallory said. Just like you were never going to tell me about the other loans. Just like you were never going to tell the partners about the cracks in the foundation. She reached down and picked up her purse. She slung it over her shoulder. Mallory? Derek asked, his voice rising in panic. Where are you going? We need to go home. We need to call a lawyer. You need to call a lawyer, Mallory corrected him. I am going to my mother's house. You can't leave me, Derek shouted. Not now. I am in a crisis. I am not leaving you because of the money. Derek, Mallory said, her voice steady. I am leaving you because I finally see you. I see what you are. And I refuse to let my son grow up thinking that this is what a man looks like. She turned to me. Lacey, are you driving? I am, I said. Derek looked around the room, desperate for any leverage. His eyes landed on Noah. Fine, Derek sneered. Go with the loser. Go with the community college dropout. See how far you get without my money. Noah stepped forward. He didn't look like a loser. He looked like a king. I am not going to community college. Uncle Derek, Noah said. His voice was not loud, but it projected to the back of the park. It was the voice of a young man who had found his frequency. Derek laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. Oh, right, the big secret. What is it? A trade school? Going to learn to fix air conditioners? No, Noah said. I am going to Princeton. Derek froze. His mouth hung open slightly. I got accepted early decision, Noah continued. I have a full academic scholarship. I'm going to study psychology and economics. The crowd gasped again. This was the twist they hadn't seen coming. The boy who had been mocked as slow, as unmotivated, as practical, had quietly outachieved every single person in the room. Princeton? Uncle Steve muttered. The Princeton? Yes, Noah said. He looked at the family. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to ruin it. I didn't want you to make me feel bad about it. But I am not hiding it anymore. He looked at Derek. And I am definitely not going to let you make me feel small anymore, Noah said. Because I am bigger than this. I am bigger than your jokes. And I'm definitely bigger than your fraud. Derek had nothing left. The money was gone. The wife was gone. The victim was gone. He stood there, stripped of every weapon he had ever used to control us. I looked down at the pencil in my hand. I raised it up one last time. You said this was all he deserved, I said to Derek. I held the pencil in both hands. I applied pressure. The dry, cheap wood snapped with a sharp crack. I tossed the two broken halves onto the concrete floor at Derek's feet. You were wrong, I said. He doesn't need your pencil. He has his own pen. And he is going to write a story you will never be part of. I turned to my mother and sister. Let us go. We walked out of the pavilion. We left the food. We left the balloons. We left the confused, whispering relatives. We left Derek Voss standing in the wreckage of his own ego. We walked to the parking lot in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. It was the silence of liberation. When we got to the car, I unlocked the doors. Noah climbed into the front seat. He took off his graduation cap and tossed it onto the dashboard. He loosened his tie. He looked at me and smiled. It was a real smile, reaching all the way to his eyes. So, Noah said, that happened. It did, I said. Starting the engine, the air conditioning blasted cold air into our faces, washing away the heat of the afternoon. What now? Mallory asked from the back seat. Holding Mom's hand, I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 5:30. The waiver had expired. The bank was moving. The old life was over. Now, I said, putting the car in gear. We go get pizza, the good kind, the kind with the expensive cheese. And then? Noah asked. And then, I said, looking at him in the rearview mirror, we make a new rule, a permanent rule for this family. What rule? Lorraine asked, wiping her eyes. From this day forward, I said firmly, no one in this family gets to vote on Noah's value. No one gets to tell him who he is or where he is going. We are done with validation. We are done with proving ourselves to people who don't matter. Noah nodded. He looked out the window as we pulled out of the park. Leaving the chaos behind us, the sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the road. I like that rule, Noah said softly. Me too, I said. I drove us toward the city, toward the pizza, and toward a future that was finally, completely, ours. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below sharing your location and your thoughts on Derek's downfall. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Emma Revenge Stories channel, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.